Welcome to the Truth Has No Sides podcast. These conversations will be had to expand the minds and the consciousness of you, the listener. If you like the content of the show, please like the video and subscribe to our channel to help this message be seen and heard by more people. Thank you for being here and enjoy the episode. All right. Today's guest, Alexandra Norris. She's a good friend of, you guessed it, someone I play soccer with. She has an amazing story. When my friend started discussing who Alexandra was, it was something I'd never heard before. It was a story I'd never heard before. It was incredibly unique. And my first question to him, like anyone, because of this podcast, I've become very selfish. When I hear an amazing story, my first question is, could you get her on the podcast? I was just talking to another friend of mine a couple days ago, and it's amazing how many people have these stories, and they're sitting there telling you the story, and you're like, oh, why doesn't everyone else know about this? And they'll say, oh, I don't tell that to too many people. Yeah. So I don't know what it is about this podcast. I don't know what it is about just the simple questions I ask, but people are very open and willing to share, and Alexandra is the same way. So Alexandra, will you please let the world know who you are? And as usual, we've got 1, 2, 3 hours, whatever we want. We'll listen to your story, go off on tangents, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. Mm-hmm. So like he said, my name is Alexandra, and I have a pretty unique story pertaining to child abuse, trauma, and mental health. I try and be as vocal as possible, at least in just the last couple of years I have been, because I know that these things are not talked about enough, and they need to be. Mostly because it would have made such a difference in my life if people had been open about this when I was a teenager and I was really in the thick of things. And even now, it makes such an impact to me when I'm online and I see people just being open about mental health. So in particular, my story pertains to something called dissociative identity disorder, or DID. It was previously known as multiple personalities. And it's one of those topics that as soon as you say it, you can see people's mind, start to think. And they're usually referencing maybe a book they read in the 80s or a scary movie they saw where the main character had this. And so I'm immediately in my head like, ooh, what can I say as quickly as possible to make this seem normal and okay and just make this a safe space. So yeah, that's been my whole mission in life these last couple of years, is to talk about dissociative identity disorder, what causes it, normalizing mental health issues, helping people seek treatment, all the above.
Let's go into the DID.
Yeah.
Because when Ammon started speaking about that, he described it in a way that I'd never heard.
Okay.
So tell us more of what that is, and then I will have some pretty, like you said, nothing's off limits. I'll have some interesting questions for you because I'm very interested in this. So please tell us what DID is.
So dissociative identity disorder is caused from trauma, specifically child trauma, between a specific age set where your brain is just forming at those like really formative years. I believe the ages that it's most common for it to happen is if the abuse occurs between, I want to say it's like 3 and 8. And essentially, and it also has to be ongoing childhood trauma. It can't just be a one-off situation. It needs to be ongoing, and it is the most common for it to be sexual abuse to cause this. So in the mind of a child, when you're going through abuse like that you perceive as life-threatening, whether it's life-threatening or not, your brain is perceiving it that way, and it's too much to deal with, so you dissociate from reality. And in the process, little parts of your brain are splinting off from each other, but they're waiting. They don't come out as a child, it comes out later. And in my case, and this happens for most people, as soon as the abuse happens, you block it immediately. It's just too traumatic to deal with. You don't remember. So growing up, I was not aware of any of the abuse that I was going through. Not a clue. No one around me knew it was happening. There was no inkling as to anything was happening because I was blocking it immediately. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that these memories started to resurface, as well as the DID. It's not super common for people with DID to have it surface as a teenager. It's more common in adulthood, just because your brain knows what it's doing, and it's almost waiting for a moment when it feels like you're ready for it. Like you're ready to handle everything coming back. And so having it come out at 14 was a lot. And there were not really resources for me. There were not people I could look up to. There were not people I could talk to that I could relate to. There were maybe 2 or 3 books to read. You know, if you're lucky, you find a good therapist. My therapist was telling me there was a support group like 2 hours away, but everybody in it was in their 40s and 50s. I'm a 14-year-old girl. I'm not going to go to that. I don't relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
My only knowledge at the time when I was diagnosed was a friend that had talked about a scary movie that she saw where the main character had DID. And so it was really frightening and really shameful and embarrassing when I got diagnosed. But yeah, that's essentially DID. You have to go through prolonged, reoccurring childhood abuse between certain ages. It's usually sexual abuse. You block it, your brain splinters off to protect itself. And then as you get older and you're ready and those memories start coming back, so do alters. So your personality, everybody dissociates in one way or another. Who you are, this is how I like to describe it. Who you are as a mother or a daughter is different than who you are as, say, a wife or a sibling. Those are different parts of yourself. They're fluid, though. In the case of DID, they are not fluid. They are very distinct. And for it to be categorized as DID, you have to have 2 or more distinct personalities. In my case, all of my personalities were younger versions of myself. That's not always common. Some people can have personalities that are different genders. Some of them have their own names, their own interests, their own talents. I have heard of people that have DID where their alters are good at, saying, playing the piano. And the person with DID, we call them the host, or the main person, say maybe can't play the piano. It's incredible. It is completely separate parts of the brain. If you have DID and you're hooked up to the right machines, while you're dissociating, different parts of your brain light up. You can watch it happen in a brain scan. It's incredible. It's remarkable, and we don't talk about it enough. I know, it's a lot.
If I remember Amma talking about it, it's incredibly rare, right?
It is rare. Yes.
It's not only rare, but the main point of the story is it's even more rare for what you've done.
Yes.
Because you have moved past it in a sense, correct?
Yes, exactly. Okay. I no longer have DID. There is sort of a rift even within the mental health community as to whether it's possible for it to ever go away. I'm one of those people where I'm living proof that it can go away. All of my alters integrated roughly 11 or so years ago. But again, there are mental health professionals that specialize in this, that some of them don't believe that it's possible, that once you get diagnosed, it will never go away. And then there are a few that say, no, I've seen it happen. It can go away.
The numbers in the dozens, basically, across the globe that have done what you've done. Isn't it incredibly small?
I don't know the number of people that have integrated. And I think a large part of that is people just don't talk about it. It's not talked about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's one of those things that feels so taboo. And like I was saying, so shameful and embarrassing that it's just there. Since I have shared my story, it's incredible the amount of people that will reach out to me through Instagram, through anonymous pages. They have created an account on Instagram without their real name, without any photos, for the sole purpose of following me because they don't want anyone to even know that they're following me. That is how stigmatized and shameful this mental illness is. And so I think, yes, it is rare, but I think the numbers are higher than we think they are simply because we're not talking about it.
Yeah, that can fall in line with so many things. So many things that we've got this infinite universe that we have narrowed down to this tiny little perception of society on this planet. And there's so many things that are considered taboo that no one wants to talk about.
Yep.
So many people terrified to talk about their own story of what they're experiencing. And if they talked about it like you did, you still do, I think they'd see how many more people are going through that. I've yet to meet a person who doesn't have a story, who doesn't have something they're going through that they don't want the world to know, that maybe they'll take some stuff to the grave, but when they finally let it out and talk about it, it releases some of the power it has over the hold over.
Yeah, I think shame is the root of all evil.
So you're 14, get this diagnosis. Is it, you just talked about how there can be a persona that plays the piano incredibly well, and then as soon as it locks, when it's gone, you wouldn't know what key to hit ever, right? So do you mind talking about some of, how many did you have? How many personalities did you have? And when you go into them, you have no clue, right? No clue whatsoever.
It depends. In my case, yes, I had, it was like lost time. I had no memory of it. DID is interesting in the way that out of all mental illnesses, I think it varies the most symptom wise between person to person. But yes, in my case, when I would switch into an altar, I would have no memory of what was occurring. It was like a light switched. I would be in that altar, and then when I would come back to myself, it was like I had taken a nap. There are people, though, that the switching into altars is a little more fluid. Sometimes they can feel it coming on. Sometimes it's as subtle as a blink and they've swapped. Sometimes when they are in an altar, they feel more like they're having an out-of-body experience, like they're watching themselves from the corner of the room and they're kind of aware what's happening, but they can't really control what their body is doing. There are so many different scenarios. But yes, in my case, I would switch. And this is another unique thing to my story that I have never heard of anybody else experiencing this. I would switch altars by fainting. So it was almost like a portal. I would pass out as myself, as teenage Alexandra, I would pass out. And when I'd wake up, I would be, say, a 4 or 5-year-old altar. I'd be that altar, and then I'd pass out again, and I'd wake up and I'd be myself again. I've never heard of anybody else experiencing this in that way, but that's just what my body chose to do. And over the time that I had DID, I think I had maybe a dozen or so altars, just around a dozen, but most of them were just younger versions of myself.
When you fainted, came back as an altar, I assume everyone would notice that, and they would just would they play. What happens when you go into an altar? What is the best thing for a parent, a friend, anyone to do when someone slips into an altar? Is it to go along with it? Is it to try to wake them up, or is it try to, like, what happens then?
No, I don't think it's super helpful to try and get them to switch back, and I don't even know if you could necessarily. Yeah. The brain is doing it for a reason. Okay. Either like something was probably triggered to get you to switch, whether you were tired or you were hungry or you were stressed. And so in that moment, just let it roll. In my case, it was super obvious that I had switched because these childlike altars spoke like children. They acted like children. It was very obvious. Sometimes if we were out in public, say in like a grocery store, and I had fainted sort of in like the back corner of an aisle and my mom was with me, when the altar would wake up, she would say something like, "Hey, we're in the grocery store. We don't want to embarrass Alexandra. Let's try really hard to just act like her and maybe just don't talk. And we're going to leave really quickly." But then, and the childlike altars of mine were cooperative. There were a handful, though, that were not and did not understand. Some of them were just like me. They thought they were me, but they had amnesia. So they wouldn't recognize my family members, wouldn't know what was going on. They'd think I was getting kidnapped. It's a lot. And I hated having DID as a teenager. But when I look back now, I'm so grateful that it happened when I was still living at home and I had caregivers. My mom became like my 24-hour caregiver. She never left my side. And I'm so grateful for that, because I hear stories all the time of people that as adults have DID and they're maxing out credit cards and they don't know it. They're crashing their cars and they don't know it. They'll wake up in the hospital. That stresses me out. And I am so grateful that I just always just had somebody with me to make sure I didn't hurt myself, that I didn't run out into the street, that I didn't do something reckless, that I wasn't drinking alcohol, or, so many things can go wrong when you are not in your right frame of mind. Sometimes the alters are aware that they're alters. Sometimes they have no idea. They think they are their own person, so they don't realize that by not going to work, it's harming you. They don't realize, they just have no idea.
Were you still going to school?
Yeah, it was my freshman year of high school, and I made it about halfway through the year before I had to start doing homebound tutoring through the school system because I was fainting so much.
Okay.
I fainted before alters ever appeared. So there was about a 4 to 6 month window where all I was doing was just passing out constantly. And it seemed like for no reason. We know now that the trigger that had started it was that I had started my period at 14, and seeing the blood in my underwear was the trigger that started it all. And so I began fainting if I was under bodily stress. So if I was asked to do something I didn't want to do, like clean my room, if a friend was mad at me, if it was too hot outside, if I had too much homework, I would pass out. And the fainting became more frequent and more frequent and more frequent. And we saw so many doctors and specialists, and there were hospital stays, and nobody had an answer. They could not figure out why I was fainting. Every test kept coming back completely fine, medically.
Yeah.
Physically, I was fine. They could not figure it out. And it wasn't until one of our hospital stays at a children's hospital that a doctor had pulled my parents aside out in the hallway and said, "I'm just curious, has she been through any trauma?" And at the time, we didn't know anything. My parents didn't know anything. And my parents were like, "Well, no," and they were racking their brain, and they were thinking, maybe she got chased across the street one time by the neighbor's dog. And, the doctor's like, "No, never mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think they kind of had an idea that like, maybe this is what it is, but because we didn't know there was trauma. And then it was very shortly after that the alters started appearing along with the fainting.
So the alters started appearing. When did the memories come back?
About the exact same time that the alters came out. I think it was within about a 1 week span that my first memory resurfaced, that the alters started coming out.
So the memory came back. We have a lot of thoughts that come in that aren't ours. Start to understand consciousness and the mind.
Right.
And there's just it's the mind and consciousness is the whole. We can have random. When did it click in that they just weren't random thoughts? When and how did you know for sure that was a memory? Just like by a bodily feeling, like just holy shit, this is.
For me, it was very clear. Again, other people have different experiences, but for me, I was at a church youth dance. I was dancing with a teenage boy that had kind of scruff on his face, and it set something off. And I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. Thankfully, my mom was there chaperoning. I ran out into the hallway. She followed me. We found an empty room. We went in, and I remember laying on the floor, shaking, and I couldn't breathe. And I felt like something was coming, and I didn't know what, but it was the most intense feeling of impending doom. And then all of a sudden, my vision went black, and it started playing in my head like a movie. So I could see it, like clips, and it wasn't super clear. It was fragmented, like a man's hands, the carpet color, the color of my shirt. There were the dresser in the corner. There were little just fragments that were coming to me, but there was enough to know what was happening. And it was so horrifying. I couldn't make it stop. The memory just had to play through what it was. And I was trying so hard to ground myself, laying on that dirty church carpet with my mom by my side. You know, she was just like rubbing my hair, like, it's okay. It's okay. I don't know what's happening, but it's okay. I couldn't even tell her what was happening. It was horrifying and it was physically painful. Again, I think that's just one of those things that my body did. But when I'd have a memory, my whole body would ache like I had hit a funny bone, but it was my whole body. And it was so excruciating. And I just would have to wait for the memory to finish. And as soon as the memory was over, I would faint. So with this first one, fainted. It took me a long time to wake up from that one. And when I did, I just had this moment with my mom in that empty church room of just like, something happened, Mom. I think I know what's causing this. And then from there, we put the pieces together and we had a name for it. The child psychologist I was seeing officially diagnosed me, and she said, I'm not qualified to treat this. I don't feel comfortable. I don't have training. It was a lot within a couple weeks span that we realized why I was fainting, that maybe more memories were going to happen, and then trying to figure out who it was. There was a lot happening.
When did the first altar appear then?
I want to say just within days of that first memory.
And who was it?
I believe it was my 5-year-old altar, who within the mental health community, they refer to as the gatekeeper altar. So everyone that has DID has one altar that is considered the gatekeeper or the manager altar. And they sort of they front the most, they have the most control, and they have a vague sense of all the other altars within the system. And they can kind of communicate with them or maybe pull some forward. And in my case, she just called herself the 5-year-old altar.
So they didn't have different names. They were just younger youths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Did you keep a timeline of like number 2 showed up, number 3 showed up? Was there the first one showed up around 14 after that, days after the first faint. 14 to what? Did they keep showing up?
Let's see. I integrated when I was 20 years old.
So 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How? Because this is a rare occurrence that you said. Yeah. It's there's a lot of, from what I've heard from you, from Ammon, most people don't integrate. So right. What did you do? Were you just lucky? Were you doing something others weren't doing? Combination of the two, I assume?
I wish I had a really good answer for you.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, it's not, and I get asked this all the time by people that have DID, like, help me, what did you do? I need to make this way. It's not something I was actively working towards. I knew it was something that I wanted. The amazing therapist that I was seeing throughout this whole time, she had mentioned that she thought it was maybe possible. She had heard rumors of it being possible, but she didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. It just kind of happened. And when I look back now, I think I can kind of pinpoint what occurred in order for it to happen. And a big part of that was, 1, I had a really great therapist. 2, my mom was a really incredible and super supportive caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, I did the work. And what I mean by that is every single therapy session I went to, I went in head first. I didn't shy away from the hard stuff. I was so determined to get better and to not make this my life. We did the work. I dived in. I sat with the hurt. I sat with the ugly. I really analyzed all the really horrible, nasty stuff. I embraced the altars, which was the hardest part. And my mom helped me do that. I think she, at some point, just through motherly instinct, had decided that instead of when I switched into an altar trying to like get them to go away, she would embrace them. She would welcome them. She made them feel seen and made them feel heard. And I realize now that the altars are there for a reason. Each specific altar is there for a really specific purpose. Maybe they're really angry over what you went through. Maybe one altar has a specific memory to share. Maybe one altar is really sad. Whatever they are there for, there's a reason. And my mom took the time to talk to each of them individually and really hear them out and make them feel heard and seen and like, okay, I get it. That would upset me too. And I think once my altar started to feel like, okay, we've done our job, then they just really slowly over time just kind of stopped coming out. It was one of those things where one day I had realized that it had been a long time since I had fainted or switched into an altar. And then that day became weeks, became months. Now it's been 11 or 12 years. So
I also assume the youth helped with that, because it's kind of like teaching an old dog new tricks type of thing. When
yeah,
if this opens up as an adult, you've got constructs, you've got beliefs, you've got ideals, you've
yes.
built a system to keep yourself safe, and then all of a sudden that is uprooted immediately. That sounds horrific, just as horrific as a 14-year-old with junior high school friends, everything like that. But it seems like the youth is part of that as well, because it's still,
Yeah.
the mind's still developing, and you've got an
Yep.
amazing mother, and it's easier. The kid's more open, adaptable, sponge-like
Exactly.
to accept
Mhm.
what needs to happen to help.
Yep. Yep. I think I also knew I had something to fall back on because I had such a good support system. I think that adults with DID are less willing to have their altars go away because in a lot of instances, their altars are all they have. Maybe they don't have family around. Their altars are their family. They are their escape from reality.
I
Whatever they went through is way too much to deal with, and they are glad that they have the altars.
And I assume they probably lose a lot of friends and family during this process before they know what DID is. And even if they do know what DID is, it may be too much for the friend or family member
Mhm.
to handle in that moment.
Yes. Yes. It is hard
Ugh.
to explain. And even if you do take that chance to explain it, you could very well just freak people out or they say, this is too much for me to deal with.
Shit, I hear of people losing family and friends over someone who starts to meditate
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not prayer, it's not part of their religion. They decide to ask questions against whatever it is they grew up in. So if friends and family members are willing to like, holy shit.
We kept it really quiet. And mostly because I wanted it to be kept quiet.
Mhm.
I right before this all went down, I like to joke that I peaked in 8th grade. I feel like I was like at the top of my game. Like I was class president. You know, I had the highest grade point average in every single class. I was in the school play. I had the lead. I sang a solo. It was just all these things. I felt like I had really peaked. And adults would always say to me like, "Oh, you're going to do such great things. You're so smart. You're so talented." And then to have all of this just implode, and now all of a sudden I felt like a freak. I could not have people know. So we kept it really quiet.
Mm.
I had 2 friends that knew. I had a couple of church leaders that knew. My grandparents knew. I had 2 or 3 cousins that knew, and that was it. We kept it so quiet because I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. I did not want anyone to know.
How frequent would these altars come?
Very frequent. Um,
A couple
I
times a week, once a month?
No, daily, daily.
Holy shit.
I would faint and or switch into an altar up to 40 times a day.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot. And so the homebound tutoring was helpful in the way that we could kind of hide it from kids. And of course, the fainting aspect was less difficult to hide because I was just constantly fainting. And so the story that we would tell people was, I went through childhood trauma, I blocked it, and now that I'm older, the memories are coming back and my body's reacting by fainting. That was the watered down version that I would tell people. There was no mention of dissociative identity disorder or alters or personality, nothing. It was just block trauma, now I faint. That was my easy way of explaining what was happening to people around me.
15, 16, 17 through 20, would that 40 times a day, did that lessen as you got older because you started handling it better? Your mom, the therapist?
Yeah, I would say the last year or two, that number significantly decreased. And of course, there were off days where, say, I would switch into an alter and I would be that alter for 2 or 3 days. So that was like, sometimes that would happen where I wouldn't be switching that much, but I would be an alter for that long.
Did they have different names?
I don't believe that any of mine went by different names. I think they just called themselves by the ages they were and recognized that they were me, but little. They would refer to me as Alexandra.
Did they have, so they're being protective. Did they have anything unique to them, like the playing of the piano? Was there any one of the alters that was just like an astrophysicist at 5 years old or something?
No. No, I wish.
Okay.
No, they similar things to just, yeah, Alexandra, but what Alexandra would have been like as a child, or their perception of what a child would be like, because it's coming from my teenage brain.
And the only thing that keeps popping up in my mind, and we've already talked, what we've talked about, I don't think this is that movie, James McAvoy?
Yeah, Split.
Okay.
Yeah, I know there are others, but that Split one is the most common that I frequently hear. I think there's even a second one, and that came out before I was open about my DID. I was going to take this to my grave. I had every intention of never telling a living soul, especially after it went away. I was like, why would I tell people? I got what I wanted. This is a miracle. It wasn't until, what year was it? 2021 that I started telling people. I made a video, and that was sort of my way of like coming out. But that first movie came out before I had said anything. And I remember people like posting about it online, or my friends being like, we're going to go see it in the theaters. I'm just like dying inside because like, oh, I want to tell you so badly. And this hurts me. This hurts other people with DID. It's a completely inaccurate description of the illness, and it's hurtful, and it's perpetuating this idea that people with DID are freaks, that people with schizophrenia are freaks, that people with bipolar disorder are freaks. We're not. And especially in the case of DID, it's not something you were born with. It's because something happened to you. It was out of your control. You were completely innocent. Someone violated your body, and now your mind is being violated. And it's horrible. And you just want people to understand and have sympathy. And instead, they're making blockbuster movies about people that can crawl up walls and they murder people. And it's not helpful.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like too much of the movies that are being made are helpful.
Yeah.
It seems like part of the tearing down and the changing to better is happening right now, which is great. Which is great.
Slowly but surely, we'll get there.
And how old are you now? So when you were 20, what year was when things started to just all come together and go away?
So I'm 30 years old now.
Okay, so 10 years ago.
It was pretty early in my early 20s. Sorry, not like that beginning year of when I turned 20. It was just one of those things that, like, I had been like, hey, I think it's been a couple days, hasn't it? Since I've been in an altar. And we're like, oh yeah, that's interesting. And just each time in between an altar would come out, that space just got longer and longer. Again, I wish I had just this fantastic answer or outline of like, here's how you integrate. I don't. But I do think a big part of that is just realizing that each altar is there for a very specific purpose, finding out what that reason is, making sure they know that they feel heard and valued and seen, and that you've got it from here. But you know what? Our minds do crazy things. I know that better than anybody. And even if you do all those things, who's to say that they'll ever go away?
Well, I I think that's the unique thing with all the stuff that is being taught, where people's hearts are in the right place. They're trying to help others with whatever it is, spirituality or DID or anything. There is no, if you really dig into stuff, there's really no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
Like the books about happiness or the books about money or the books about whatever it is, saying, if you do this, this will happen.
Right.
I've just seen too many people that there are examples of people getting, using that 10-step, whatever it is, and they get what they want.
Yeah.
But there's more, often a lot more, that do that 10-step program and don't get what they want.
Yeah.
We only focus on who gets it.
Yeah. When people come to me for guidance, I often say, I can guide you, but I cannot fix this for you. Everybody's situation is so different. My memories are different than yours. My trauma is different than yours. My support system is different than yours. Where I live is different from you. There are so many factors that make a difference. Do you have access to healthcare? Do you have access to a really great therapist? Do you have access to medication? There are so many factors. And again, like, what actually caused your splitting in your mind to happen is different than what happened to me. Maybe what happened to you is a million times worse, and your brain just will never go back. And that is a really harsh reality. And I lived with that for a long time, of just like, well, this is it for me. But again, I wish I had such a good answer, but all I can do is I can give you tips. I can give you support, guidance, but I cannot fix this for you. I don't even know if you can fix it for you,
Yeah, but I think the honesty probably helps them, and the fact that you did what you did at least gives them hope.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
So 40 times a day to 20 years old, 21 years old, a couple days pass, a week pass, the gap between the altars. When was the last time you slipped in?
I don't even know.
Good.
It's been that long.
Great.
And sometimes people will ask me, just out of curiosity, how can you be certain that your altars are really gone and that maybe one day they won't come back, or that they're just lying dormant? And all I can say is that when I had DID, even though I was not aware when I would switch into altars, when I was myself, it was almost like I could sense them in the back of my mind. Not that I could talk to them or control them, but it was almost like there was just this sense that they were there, like they were hanging around. That's gone. It's been gone. I also have been through other traumatic things since integrating, and I feel like if they were to have come back out, it would have already happened. Just a couple of years ago, leaving work, I thought I was getting kidnapped. Just outside my car. I feel like that would have been enough to have the altar come back.
Yeah.
Or becoming a mother sometimes will trigger people, and that will be their trigger for when their altars come back. I feel like it maybe would have happened then. I am a mother, and that did not happen. I went through a nasty divorce a couple years ago, and I feel like that would have been the trigger to make it happen. Didn't happen. There's all these things that I can just feel it in my bones. And I know that makes no sense, but they are gone, and they couldn't come back even if I wanted them to. I know. It's a lot to take in, especially if you've never heard of this before and you're just sort of trying to soak in.
So my mind always goes differently when I hear these stories because of my path with my teacher and seeing things that most people don't think are possible. people levitating, people. I know so many people who have had experiences, see things, see
Mhm.
auras, see angels, see beings, see different
Yeah.
dimensions, slip in and out of different dimensions.
Mhm.
Um, I've heard it all. And because of what my teacher did and stripped away all of the boxes and the constructs, reading the books, the experiences of people, more and more people are coming out talking about near-death experiences. They're talking about things they see. You hear the same theme time and time and time again. And uh, it's a terrible example, people think, but I know Mount Everest is a physical thing. I've never been there, but I know it's there. So
Mhm.
if I hear these same stories and these people experiencing the same thing, I've never experienced it, but I know what they're experiencing is real.
Right.
Because I understand consciousness, I understand this universe, I understand how connected it is, I understand people can channel, I understand people can read the Akashic records, I understand people who have never met each other can know exactly everything about you. Remote viewing, someone sitting in Las Vegas can read what is on a desk in Russia.
Mhm.
You just hear all of these things, and instead of thinking it's this one-off magical thing and it's bullshit or it's a conspiracy theory or possibility, you just start, if your mind's okay with it, you start piecing together. You're like, anything is possible. So when I hear of you saying I could feel their presence, that's what channels talk about.
Mm.
They feel a presence coming in, and some of them can channel with their eyes open, some channel in a completely different voice personality, and
Mhm.
they have no clue what they just channeled for 2 hours until they watch the video, right? So there's just these different things
Yeah.
that happen. um, so my mind never goes to it's too much. My mind goes to holy shit, all of this is possible. And then my heart gets involved and says it just breaks for what we go through as humans,
Yeah.
um, in this physical realm. What did I remember you talking about being at a church dance? I remember you
Mm.
talking about having a good support there with church. What was your upbringing with church, with God, with religion, as a kid, when you were 14, and now?
I grew up in a Mormon household.
Okay.
Um, we moved a lot growing up. So I've lived in a lot of places. Thankfully, the moving stopped when the DID came out. My mom thinks of it as such a blessing that we ended up where we did because the therapist that I needed happened to be there. Um, but yeah, grew up in a Mormon household. Um, it definitely rocked my faith as a teenager when all of this started happening. It made going to church really hard, because there is a memory where something's happening in a church building. And if you are familiar at all with LDS church buildings, they all look the same.
Yep.
They have all the same textiles and materials and furniture. And so going to church was really hard for me. And so that definitely took a toll on my faith. Um, and then as an adult, I just over time just realized that the Mormon church was just not for me. So I am no longer a part of that faith. And now I'm sort of in an interesting place of I don't know what I believe and I kind of like it. I like not knowing.
Okay.
But yeah, grew up very Christian, very strong Christian household, and now just in a place of I don't know, and I like it here.
So you have, yeah, there's no curiosity or interest in, most people who leave Mormonism or Christianity, they'll go east, they'll go to
Right.
Buddhism, right?
Right. Right.
Or the church let them down, so they become an atheist. So you're
Right.
just in this neutral, whatever. Yeah, you just don't know, don't care, in a
Yeah,
sense.
and sometimes people wanna know, but like, "Okay, but like, but what do you believe?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know, and I like it. I like not knowing." Because I spent my whole life thinking I knew, and it didn't work for me. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you dig deep enough, no one knows. That Russian
yeah.
doll is going to continue to get smaller and
Yeah.
smaller,
Yeah.
and all these religions and spiritualities become a new religion, and we've moved away from religion to spirituality, thinking it was more open, and it's become just as dogmatic, and it's
Yeah.
got its own principles, its own practices, its own
Right.
techniques, its own rigidity and restrictions.
Yeah.
And we were given a tool in the mind, which you know very well from what you've experienced, that wants answers.
Yeah.
And we build answers up just out of self-preservation.
Yeah.
To feel less fear. But there
Yeah.
is nothing there's nothing we really know. Even the most intelligent people, all the people talking about consciousness and metaphysics and everything, they're getting closer.
Yeah.
But we'll never understand. Never. We just don't have the capacity. Our mind has too small of a perspective to understand any of that stuff
Yeah.
for real.
Yeah. Yeah. Not knowing is a very comfortable place for me, and maybe that has to do with what I've been through.
Yeah. 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 Knowing didn't work for you, so not knowing is a lot safer.
Yeah.
A lot more comfortable.
Yeah. Anything is possible.
It really is. It really is. Let me think here. Did you have any siblings growing up?
Yeah, I have 2 younger sisters.
Okay.
There is a 3-year age gap, and then the youngest, there's a 10-year age gap between she and I.
Okay.
This was very hard for my middle sister in particular, just because she was 3 years younger and she was also in pretty formative years and was watching this all happen.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it might have been, out of my family members, I think this was the hardest for her. It was hard for my parents in different reasons. My dad's in law enforcement, and so it was hard for him in the sense that he felt like he could never get me legal justice for what had happened to me, that he couldn't fix it that way, in that sense. And my mom struggled in the way that, she felt like she had failed, that she didn't prevent it from happening, even though nobody could have. And, we didn't know at the time, and that she was just constantly with me, and that I can't imagine the kind of toll that took on her.
Mm.
My youngest sister was pretty little, so she doesn't have a ton of memories from this time. But my middle sister, for sure, it impacted her the most, I think.
What does it do? What is the impact it has on you now, just from day to day?
Yeah, I don't think about it a ton. And when I do think about it, it kind of feels like a different lifetime ago. Like, it feels so much longer than a decade ago. Or it almost feels like it was somebody else's life because it was so long ago. My life looks so different now. But so even though the DID part doesn't impact me anymore, just the repercussions of going through trauma affects me. I have chronic reoccurring nightmares constantly. Almost every night I have a horrible nightmare. I definitely have anxiety and depression. I've been on antidepressants since I was 14, and I will probably be on them until I die, and I'm okay with that. Now that I'm a mom, I have a lot of anxiety around my son and what happens with him. Just being so worried that something will happen or that I can't control it, and just wanting to protect him.
Yeah, that is something I don't truly understand, because I know how my mom was with me. I know how my fiance is with the 2 boys, the 11 and the 13-year-old. She's always worried about them, and for good reason. Man, I just can't imagine that constant worry of who they're around, what's going on as they get older, the decisions they make, wanting them to be good people, wanting them to be decent, wanting them to be safe. Again, it's always unique to me, this human experience that we chose to do. What are your thoughts about that? What did we choose to come here?
Mm.
The spiritual side of things, is that something that you've delved into, just meditation or anything like that, or is there any questions that you've had because of the experience you've gone through, deeper questions like what is this for, what's the reason for this, why did we even come here, why would I did I choose this, did I not choose this?
Yeah. So growing up Mormon, and like most Christian faiths, you believe that you came here because it was a choice, that you
Okay.
chose to come to Earth. And I was always taught growing up that we knew what we were going to go through and we knew it was going to be hard, but we chose it anyway.
Hmm.
And I remember hearing that as a teenager when I was going through this and just thinking, that is the biggest load of crap. There is no way that if I had known my life was going to look like this, that I would have chosen this.
Mm-hmm.
Now that time has passed, I try and think back. If I had truly known, would I have chosen this? Maybe. I don't have a super strong opinion on whether we did decide to come here or not. Sometimes sometimes I do feel like maybe I have lived before. And again, I'm at this place where like I don't know. I don't know what I believe. And I haven't dived into it, but I just feel like I have maybe been around before. My soul feels very old.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
I don't know. But yeah, but as far as yeah, did we choose to come here? I don't know. Teenage Alexandra says no.
Uh-huh.
Adult Alexandra says maybe.
Yeah, interesting. Like the duality of the necessity of duality to be in this physical form,
Yeah.
where our mind can change. And as much as I can understand, it's almost like you want time off. You don't want to seek answers. But there's a part of you that says my soul feels old,
Yeah.
and I've probably done this before. I've been in this physical form before.
Yeah.
Huh. So what now? What I remember Ammon talking about. You're beginning to tell your story more. You're beginning to help more people. Um, just helping them, guide them through this process and speaking, and so what's going on now?
Yeah. So at this point, I have made and released 2 different videos where I'm just explaining my story. The first one that I released in 2021 is 16 minutes long, so it's very lengthy, but it's very in depth. I go through everything, explaining my story and explaining what DID is. And then I made one over the summer this year, and that one is a much more condensed version, a little more informational than it is what my story is, simply because I feel like because my story is so complex and hard to understand, the video format is easier to digest for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have those 2 out on my Instagram and on YouTube. And through my Instagram page, I just frequently talk about DID and mental health in general. And um, I just want to be there. I want to be accessible for people to find me so that if they're going through this or they know somebody that's going through this, they have a resource, or they at least have someone that they can look at and say, she seems to be doing relatively okay.
Mm-hmm.
She did it. She made it to the other side. Maybe I can too. Because that would have made such a difference for 14-year-old Alexandra getting that diagnosis. It really felt like a death sentence. I had nowhere to look, nowhere to go. My examples were horrendous. I remember feeling like, this is it. I'm never going to go to college. I'm never going to move out of my parents' house. I'm never going to get to travel. I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids. This is it. I'm going to live here until my parents die, and then I'm going to get put into a home. And that is my future. And if I had just been able to come across someone like myself who was saying, hey, we did it. This sucks, but you can do it too. It would have made a huge difference. And I had always wanted to be a mother. That was a lifelong goal of mine. And that was so heartbreaking in the moment, even as a teenager, to feel like I'm never going to get to have kids. So if I had been able to hear someone say, I used to have DID and I am a mother now, that would have made motherhood feel possible to me and so hopeful. There's more to life. There's more to life outside of mental illness. And even with it, even if it never goes away, there's more. And it's so helpful to be able to put a face to someone that has the same thing as you, to hear them talk about it, to validate your experience. It's way less lonely. It makes you feel less shameful. If they can talk about it, hey, maybe I can talk about it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's been what I've been up to, is just trying really hard to spread the word and be a resource to people so that if they want to reach out to me, even if I'm just a sounding board, I know that's helpful.
So the people who cross your path, from what you spoke about earlier in the podcast, I would assume almost 100% of them are adults, because it's very rare for a child to have alters, correct?
Yes, as
Okay.
far as I'm aware, anyone that has reached out to me has been an adult.
Wow. And is mom and dad still around?
Mm-hmm. They are,
Good.
yeah.
That's good. And how old's your son?
He will be 3 in February.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else that you would like the world to know?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, other than just everybody has a story, like you were saying, and it's so important that we just not be judgmental and that we be open-minded. And that if for some reason somebody ever feels comfortable enough to share with you something that feels very private to them, or it's hard for them to share, please be kind. Like, please be so graciously kind and open-minded. And yeah, just realizing that everybody is going through something. Everybody is going through something hard. That makes it easier. And the more we can talk about it, the more we can share our experiences with each other, the easier life will be. So if you ever come across somebody with any mental illness, please don't be judgmental. Be open-minded, make your heart open, ask questions. If you're confused, ask questions. That's totally fine. Just don't make assumptions. Don't cut them off. You know, that's the last thing you need, is when you're feeling already so shameful of something, to have somebody be like, oh yeah, I'm going to validate that feeling and never talk to you again.
Yeah. I've watched that before, where I hear someone talking about two guys, or someone talking about a story of theirs, and the one person that's uncomfortable, they'll kind of just drift off. They'll ask one question, they don't like the answer, it's uncomfortable, and they'll just kind of like slowly walk away. Or how about them jazz? Like, they just change the subject.
Yeah.
So
Dig into that uncomfortability.
I,
It's making
I
you uncomfortable. Dig into it.
yeah, if they're truly willing to share something, just, there's questions you can ask. I mean, they're opening up to you, probably for you to ask questions that you feel uncomfortable asking, questions that you think like, oh, if I went through this, I wouldn't ask that. Oh, I don't want to pry. I don't want to hurt
Right.
them. I don't want to judge
Right.
them. Ignoring them is judging them. Changing the subject is showing them that it's a problem, and you don't want to deal with it. So you shouldn't have asked them in the first place. So
Yes.
yeah, like, listening to these stories, I always love to just sit there, ask questions, keep eye contact, don't cut them off, like you said. And always, if the question is going to be kind of like I asked you before we started, is anything off limits? There's there's always ways. I always hear people talking about, I don't want to ask that, or I don't feel comfortable. Just ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just say, hey, I don't feel comfortable. Am I crossing a line asking certain questions? And most times they'll say no, and then you're free.
Yeah.
Then you can ask. And if you do cross a line, they'll let you know. Or if you do ask a question they're uncomfortable with, they'll be vague and they'll give you an answer. But most of the time, I'd say 99% of the time I've ever dug into someone about their story because they haven't told it, or most people around them feel uncomfortable, they just open up like a book.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Yeah.
start saying, I continuously hear people say, man, I didn't even share this with my wife. I'm like, are you sure you want this on the podcast then? It's like, shit, man. You might want to go tell her. Well,
Yeah. All you need is somebody with an open curiosity.
mm-hmm.
that's just willing to, hear your story for someone to start opening up. And that's really important. The more you can talk about something, the less power it holds over you.
Yeah. That's what it seems like. You can see them opening up about stuff, and it's almost like a weight of the world comes off their
Yeah.
shoulders.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got one more question
Yeah.
that I ask every guest. What is truth to you?
Oh, that's such a good question. For me, truth is what feels right in my body. So, for example, if someone says something to me and it settles really well, I'm taking that as, yeah, that's probably true. I'm such an intuition, heart-based person. I always go with my heart and my gut. So for me, truth is what settles right in your body.
Beautiful. As much as I want to end there, I do have one more question now because
Yeah, please.
because of your answer. So we're gonna shift here. So everything you've gone through, how did you get back to trusting your intuition, trusting what you felt in your bones? Because that is a question I hear all the time with spiritual teachers. Someone will get up and say, how do I trust my gut? You're continuously talking about trusting your gut, trust your intuition, listen to that little voice inside. Well, sometimes we have multiple voices. So how did what you went through, how did you begin to trust your intuition, your gut, that voice inside your head to, oh, this feels wrong, go away, or this feels right, I will continue?
Yeah. For me, I would say that feeling went away as a teenager while I had DID because I felt so uncomfortable in my own body and it felt like my body had betrayed me. But then when they were gone and I was able to really realize how wonderful and beautiful my altars were, that made a difference. As soon as I could really recognize that they served such a worthy and noble purpose for me, and how grateful I was that they showed up, even though at the time it didn't feel like gratefulness. They were so smart and so clever and so selfless. They saved my life. My brain did the most incredible and creative thing to cope with what I was going through. And that knowledge alone, I'm like, how could I ever doubt what my gut was telling me when my body was capable of literally protecting itself? As a 3-year-old child, my trauma started at 3 years old. At 3 years old, my brain knew this is what we can do to protect Alexandra. That is the most beautiful and heartwarming thought. And that the altars just stuck around, let me live a beautiful, blissfully ignorant childhood. And then they were there for me when my memories came back. They were there. At the time, it felt like a curse. And now it feels more like a blessing. It's just truly incredible. And when I think about what my brain and my body did to protect me and to survive, how could I not trust what my body is trying to tell me?
That is one hell of a way to look at it. And
Yeah.
that is probably something you don't hear often for anyone who's gone through what you've gone through.
Yeah.
Because that's very hard to not look at that as just a curse, not a blessing.
Right.
I'm glad I asked that last question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Is there anywhere people can go to contact you? Is there a website that you would enjoy people knowing about? Is there anything else that you would like the world to know?
Yeah, so I'm working on a website, but for now you can find me on Instagram at I am the prism. And that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because I can share my prism metaphor. But on Instagram, there is an underscore in between each word. So I am the prism with underscores in between each word.
Okay.
And the reason that my Instagram handle is called that is because I have created my own metaphor for DID. And it goes a little bit like this. So if this is the prism, if there is one single white light, which can represent life or yourself, enters the prism, that's your life. Then the prism bends the light, which can represent trauma, before it fractures and dispenses the light, making it 10 times more beautiful than it was before. So that is my metaphor for DID that I came up with years ago when I first wanted to tell people. I was trying to come up with this clever idea of explaining it, this artsy, creative way. And yeah, the prisms fracture light. They take one single color and they dispense it into multiple completely separate colors.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's really beautiful. And that's exactly what my mind did. So I am the prism.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Alexandra, thank you. I'm always surprised how quickly these go. And we've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes. So I love how quickly this goes. I will get this edited up, cleaned up. We'll get it out in the next week or two. I'll put your website and everything in there, and we'll just go from there. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Ammon, for connecting us.
Yeah, thank you, Ammon.
And we'll shut this down, but don't hang up just yet. I need your site to upload 100% so it doesn't mess anything up.
Okay.
Alrighty, thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, see you.